Good morning everyone and welcome to the Economy, Infrastructure and Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee this morning. We'll get straight on to the business of today. Oh, what's on the agenda? Apologies.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. We appear to have one person missing, okay. Any declarations of interest from members? I'll take the silence as no. Item 3, minutes of meeting held on the 30th of May 2024. Can we accept those as a true record of events? Can I have a... Thank you, David. A seconder, please. Graham. And that takes us nicely on to item 4, which is the Staffordshire County Council's Economic Strategy Delivery Update. Over to you, Councillor Philip White.
Morning, Chair. Morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. So this is our periodic review of the delivery of the economic strategy, which the committee last considered in December of last year. Work has been ongoing since then on the various strands of our economic strategy. So in addition to the overarching economic strategy for Staffordshire, we have our employment and skills strategy, our rural economic strategy and our visitor economy action plan, which all support that overall delivery of the economic strategy. I think we've got enough strategies there to be going on with. In terms of key activities since we last saw you, the most important activity that we've been undertaking is the transfer of the responsibilities, assets and liabilities of the Stoke and Staffordshire Local Enterprise Partnership, following a decision by government that local enterprise partnerships functions would be rolled into top-tier local authorities. This has been managed by the establishment of a joint committee which includes representation from Staffordshire County Council and Stoke-on-Trent City Council. In both cases, it's our leaders and deputy leaders. The inaugural meeting of that joint committee took place in May, and both local authorities committed to continue joint working across the Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent geography, including on several of the matters that are set out in this report. The other key thing that we will be doing together is we will be producing an overarching economic strategy for the full geography of Staffordshire County and City area. It does not at this stage appear that that will be radically different from the economic strategy that you'll be scrutinising today, but it will take into account some factors that are germane to the city, as well as those that are germane to the county area. Most areas, though, are very much, as you would expect, in common, but the forward scrutiny, you may wish to consider which strategy you want to be looking at, as there will be a newer one coming along shortly. In recent months, the economic indicators for Staffordshire have been very positive and have shown the success of our strategy to intervene where necessary to address short-term impacts, whilst not losing our focus on the longer-term ambitions and priorities set within the economic strategy, and crucially focusing on enabling our businesses to get on with doing what they do best, which is doing business and collectively growing our economy. In terms of the overall economic picture, we continue to see the impact locally of national and international factors, particularly inflation, which we're very pleased to see now is back to target and has been so for the last two reports. We do so see the continuing pressure on costs from the invasion of Ukraine. And we are concerned to continue to monitor that. There are some indicators for those who follow global inflation indicators, such as the shipping container price index, that actually there may be a bit of volatility in the inflation world still there to come. In terms of disposable income, we're very pleased to say that Staffordshire is outstripping the national and regional performance for increases in disposable income, which has increased by 4.4% in the county over the last year compared to 4% nationally and 4% across the West Midlands and 3% across the UK during the same period. That means that on average earnings for Staffordshire residents have increased by over 12% over the last year compared to 5% for the West Midlands and England as a whole, which are both at 5%. So that earnings growth is really pleasing. It's one of the key things that we're aiming to see, because that directly impacts the lives of people, particularly in a world where things are more expensive. We also remain a very low unemployment area, trending significantly below the national and regional averages, massively below the regional. But we are keeping a close eye on unemployment, because we have seen a number of month-on-month increases in that, small but important to the individuals concerned. And at the same time, we've seen a decline in the total number of vacancies in Staffordshire, so they are roughly at parity now. Previously, we had far more jobs than we had vacancies. So again, we are monitoring that very closely, although we do anticipate that when the Bank of England sees fit to reduce interest rates, that should have a very positive effect on the employment situation. Those are some of the overall headlines. What I now propose to do is to ask Mr. Hodge just to detail some of the highlights from the priorities in the economic strategy, if that's all right with you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Good morning, Chair. I'll just pick out some highlights, if I may, from the report. In terms of supporting town centre and high street regeneration, towards the end of 2023, we learnt of a successful bid by Stafford Borough Council for £20 million of levelling up funding to support their Stafford Gateway scheme. This was a great result, because within that award was circa £18 million towards the reclamation of the Doxey Road site. There is an element of uncertainty in that, however, because we're still waiting confirmation from government that the money will be forthcoming, but all indicators are that we should get the money to enable us to carry on with the reclamation scheme. With the successful bid, this means that over £70 million has been secured for Staffordshire local authorities to support town centres and their regeneration over the forthcoming years. And in total, that's £220 million of national funding, which the County Council continues to work proactively with our districts and boroughs to support them in the regeneration of their really important schemes to support the regeneration of town centres. It's worth highlighting that the Eastgate regeneration scheme moves forward. We are now in detailed discussions with Ion Developments following a really complex procurement process to understand the costs associated with the regeneration of the Eastgate area. The challenge there is cost versus value, so we're trying to identify what the potential risk is for each party to then enter into a much more detailed development agreement allowing the successful regeneration of the Eastgate area. In terms of higher skilled and higher paid workforce, it's worth probably just highlighting that since 2011, the number of residents who have no qualifications has more than halved, whilst we now have around 80,000 more residents who have a degree level qualification. And this is as a result of significant investment and work not only of the County Council, but our skills providers across Staffordshire, and it's very much worth highlighting. In terms of start-up and step-up businesses, this is very much about growing your own, and the County Council has a really strong and proactive business start-up and business step-up programme, and we're starting to see real traction within the markets. It's worth also highlighting that since the inception of the growth hubs, which were the responsibility of the local enterprise partnerships, this is now transferred across to the County Council and Stoke-on-Trent City Council. I'm pleased to say that the government has confirmed that the county will receive £300,000 for the delivery of the growth hub up until 2025. I'd also like to highlight to the committee that the council, together with Stoke-on-Trent, secured a full year's allocation in the LEP reserves to enable us a 2-year programme rather than a 1-year programme to support the Growth Hub activities, which we think is really important because it allows continuity and confidence in programming of activity. It's also worth highlighting that LCBET programme, which ran for 7 years, has now concluded. That's the Low Carbon Business Evolution Programme, and this is estimated to have reduced carbon emissions by over 2,000 tonnes annually, supported over 350 businesses and provided over £1 million grant to unlock £1.3 million of private sector funding. Chair, I'll probably draw a line under it there because there is quite a lot in the report, and I really value the questions, of course. So unless you want me to carry on, maybe if I draw a line there.
Thanks, Anthony. Questions? Graham?
Thanks, Chair. In the report, there's mention of Chatterley Valley, and there's also mention of Give Energy. Two obviously important things. Is Chatterley Valley just going to be a distribution hub? Because I know that Give Energy are looking for a substantial site as a manufacturing base. And my understanding is that whoever's running Chatterley Valley are not interested in helping out Give Energy. I just thought I'd find out a little bit more about what's happening at Chatterley Valley as it is in my division. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Graham. Chatterley Valley is, at the end of the day, a private development, albeit one that's supported with taxpayers' money. So the commercial decision that the owners make in terms of who they sell or lease any of the parcels of land to is a matter for them. The planning permission does allow the sort of activities that I believe Give Energy would want to carry out on any site that they occupy, so there's no inherent reason why they couldn't become an occupier on that site, but it is a matter for the market at the end of the day. What I will say more broadly, though, is just as we are committed to supporting the developers of Chatterley Valley in rolling out that site, which would be a really significant employment land site for the north of the county, we are also committed to supporting Give Energy as a really big contributor to sustainable economic growth in Staffordshire. I've been out with the Chief Executive and I believe the Director for Economy, Infrastructure and Skills has also been out to meet the senior management team at Give Energy to offer them that support, and we've got a number of lines of activity that we're operating with them, both in terms of future sites for the business, but also supporting some of their educational work as well, because they're a really good giver of effort and resource back into the community as well. So we're a big supporter of that business in a variety of ways.
Charlotte?
Thank you. First of all, apologies for being a bit late and missing your initial remarks. The skills agenda is really important, but what we have in the UK is a distorted skills spread. Only 15% of women are actually involved in the engineering and tech sectors, despite being over half the population. So what is the County Council doing to encourage more women to take up STEM careers? Because if we want to ensure that our population is firing on all cylinders, we need to make sure that we use all the skills available to us. And there are a lot of women who are not encouraged to go into engineering or indeed into computer science because they don't see the opportunities, they don't maybe understand the roles which were available. And that means that many people who perhaps don't want to go into what are regarded or have been regarded as traditional women's roles are then lost to the industry.
Morning. I think that's quite a stark statistic, isn't it? And I think that is likely to illustrate some real waste of talent that could be deployed in those areas. The County Council has a key role in helping to shape the skills environment in the county of Staffordshire. We would like more powers and more ability to shape that further, and we hope that the new government, which is displaying a very early interest in skills, might devolve more of those powers to us here. Within the powers that we do have, we invest a considerable amount of effort in terms of promoting careers in STEM related subjects to women, just as we do incidentally to other groups that are less well represented in those areas as well. But particularly relevant to this is our Women in Business programme, You may also have seen in the last few months some work that we've done in terms of promoting some of our own women who work in these areas. And I won't name names, but I can think of a couple of women who I work with in engineering roles within the county council who've personally taken part in that. I might ask Mr. Ayres to speak to some of the work that he's done within his directorate that relates to this as well, because I know that is extensive. So we do lead by example. The other area that inevitably this comes to, though, is careers advice and guidance, which is too much of a Cinderella area, I think, in this country. I think you can have the best skills provision in the world, but if you haven't got people who understand their options properly and understand the breadth of those options, then people won't find their way to the best thing for them. Now, careers advice and guidance is another one of the areas that has come back to the top tier authorities as a result of the changes in the LEP. So we are going to be taking a particular interest in making sure that that careers advice and guidance is really embedded in all of our schools and that the guidance is effective. And effective for me means that all individuals considering their career options are genuinely considering their career options, not some narrow view of what those might be. I know that's not a perfect answer. Unfortunately, I don't have all the tools at my disposal that I'd like to be able to give that, but in terms of its importance, it is considerable. It's simply about equity and fairness at the end of the day, isn't it? I sense you might want to come back, but I will encourage Mr. Ayres to speak as well when the chairman is ready for him.
I mean, the reason I asked the question is because of the LEP responsibilities coming back into the county council. And I certainly welcome the new government's determination to bring the skills and the determination of what skills we need to the local economy. I'm just hoping that as we're somewhat behind the wheel in terms of devolution, that the fact that we don't have a devolution arrangement, that doesn't prevent us from taking up those responsibilities. I'm hoping that that's not the case, because clearly we're not yet at a point at which we have decided what we need to do. But I certainly welcome the fact that local economies know what skills they require. And certainly, if we were sitting in the West Midlands, then obviously engineering and STEM type subjects are clearly top of the agenda.
I'll just come back briefly on that, if I may, before Mr. Ayres speaks. So, I don't recognise your description of Staffordshire being behind the curve in terms of devolution. We're at exactly the point where there's consent from the leaders of Staffordshire. So that's all 10 of our local authorities, with a mix of political control, as you know, within that as well, who've come together to establish a leaders board, which is a vehicle that can receive devolution powers if appropriate. I have to say, I'm not sure why the skills powers that we would like can't simply be devolved to us anyway. I'm not sure why it's necessary for there to be some overarching infrastructure for that to happen. We've demonstrated through our work in terms of our skills plan here, but also our contribution to the LSIP, the Local Skills Improvement Plan for the whole of Stoke and Staffordshire, which I think is generally recognised to have been much improved by the contribution from the County Council. We've demonstrated our capacity to do these things. So whilst we recognise government has a mandate to create national structures, I'm not sure why it requires a devolution deal for us to have those. My hope is, and this might answer a few other questions about how we interact with national government, with that change in government, my hope is that government's focus will be on looking at what local areas need to support their economic growth, and doing that in an equitable way, rather than looking to local areas to support a one-size-fits-all agenda for how that happens. We're pretty good with our partners, both in local government and in business and skills providers, in terms of that, the skills agenda specifically, in working together to establish what we need locally. So it would be really, really welcome if government's approach is going to be to say, what do you need and how can you help us? And provided that's broadly within the guide rails, providing that to us, and the skills agenda would be a wonderful place to start. I I'm not sure whether there was a question in your comment, but I hope that's useful.
Darryl, did you want to come in now?
Yeah, just quickly to add, I mean, the Deputy Leader's covered pretty much everything, so I haven't got a massive amount to add, but I think the two things I'd like to say, firstly, within the County Council, we did quite a lot of work within the Department of Economy, Infrastructure and Skills at looking at women in leadership and how we can support and encourage more women into leadership roles across the range of services we have, which traditionally, nationally, have been seen as male-type roles, whether that's engineering or planning. But also, we've done work, projects with schools around STEM in primary schools and encouraging everyone to take up STEM activities, particularly trying to target young women, young girls, because it's, as you said, there's a gap in this country in that area. And every year we celebrate our women engineers in Staffordshire County Council, try and hold them up as role models and showcase the opportunities that people have as a result of taking an engineering route, which is really important that those role models are there and celebrated. I think the other bit is around the careers hub that the Deputy Leader mentioned, coming back to the upper tier authorities, having a greater grip and control over its activities and the careers advice it does within schools means we can focus on those areas. One, we need from a local economic perspective, but two, where there's inequalities that we need to tackle and those disparities that we need to challenge. So I think it's exciting what's ahead of us in terms of the grip and control we're going to have over some of those areas. And if those devolution offers are going to come to the local area as well, we should have most of the levers we need at our disposal then to really tackle some of those issues.
Philip.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions, if I may. One is more of a sort of wider scale. I noticed today that the government are having pay talks with part of the people in the country, and I know that they've already offered education 5.5% pay rises. What I'm concerned about is, could this have a big effect on inflation and interest rates, and will that affect our economic growth strategy? So that's that one. The other one is more local to me, is the 5500 growth corridor. We now have a new administration, we have a new MP in Uttoxeter. So, and I'm concerned about that to make that successful, we know that the infrastructure around Uttoxeter, which we've already started to look into, particularly those two junctions, will that work still go ahead, or are we concerned that we will have to go back to square one and start negotiating again? Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for those questions. Morning. Okay, so firstly regarding public sector pay settlements and inflation, it's a bit above my pay grade. However, I think it is generally recognised that pay restraint in the public sector has been one of the contributions that government has made to bringing inflation back to its target. There are many other contributions that have been made, but yes, if we see another round of very high above inflation pay rises, that would naturally be expected to impact on inflation. I'll risk straying outside of the guide rails of this committee a little bit, just to say a couple of other things though, because I am really passionate about education. It does have a direct impact on our economic growth. The first is, I think that pay rises for teachers, and I'm married to a teacher, so it directly affects my household, are most welcome, of course, for those people. But two things they don't do is, firstly, they don't reduce the issues in the classroom that actually have a bigger impact on the well-being of teachers than a pay rise, in my experience of speaking to many teachers. So behaviour management and also children who are apathetic or are not focused on their studies is absolutely key. And the second thing is workload. It's unnecessary workload and admin. You would need a lot more than a 5.5% pay rise to compensate for those issues, but those are areas that the government could attend to, which would benefit education enormously. And the other thing on it is to say there isn't a pay rise, as far as I'm aware, for teaching assistants in this proposal. So I think we were talking about equity a moment ago, but also in terms of utility. Teachers are not the only people in the classroom. Hugely valued though they are, teaching assistants as well need to be treated fairly. And in terms of the economic impact of a pay rise, I think you would probably see more attraction in a pay rise for teaching assistants than you would for teachers. So forgive me for that, and thank you for letting me stray a little bit. In terms of the 5,500, this is a key economic project, not just for Staffordshire, but for the wider Midlands, and it is nationally significant in terms of the offer that it has. We've rehearsed it many times here, so I'm not going to attempt to do so again. What we need initially from the government is we need confirmation that phase one of the improvements to the road, the A5500 between Stoke-on-Trent and the Toyota Island in Derbyshire, are going ahead. That confirmation hasn't been received as yet, so we really do need that. That's one of 6 projects nationally that are in the top tier of the Network North Road improvements. 6 in England, 2 in Scotland. They need to be confirmed. What we then very much hope to see is government engaging with the 5,500 project more broadly. There's a very small ask from government of £3 million of funding over 3 years to develop some of the strands of that project, which are around the little bits of wiring for considerable economic growth that businesses aren't going to do for themselves, but government can do through Staffordshire County Council working with partners across that corridor. I very much hope they will look to do that. It's the least political thing in the world as well. So a change of government doesn't change the sheer logic of investing in that. It is an incredibly good deal for this country to invest in that corridor. So we appreciate changes in government mean a little bit of time to reassess and, you know, work out which way is up, etc. But I would hope that the new government will follow on from the excellent engagement we had from the previous government, but actually sign on the dotted line to get on with this. It's in everyone's interest that it happens.
David.
Thank you, Chairman. 2 things, if I may. One is that yesterday I was at the one of the degree ceremonies at Stafford University, and I was pleasantly surprised to see the number of high-achieving female graduates that were receiving their awards yesterday and during the previous week. And so I think that Staffordshire University, from that point of view, is doing an exceptionally good job in encouraging females. But it goes earlier than that. It goes into the system that we have, where those of you who have a long journey into Stafford in the morning may well have been listening to Radio 4 this morning, where they had a superb lady on who is now, she's a long-standing, highly successful engineer who's been decorated for the services that she's provided. But in particular, she now runs an organisation that encourages females to go into engineering. And it would seem to me that if we're being slightly more proactive about the encouragement of people to come into engineering, it may well be worthwhile contacting her and her organisation, encouraging girls to come into engineering, to perhaps have a joint conference with our 2 universities and maybe some senior people within the schools sector to look at how we in Staffordshire could be much more proactive in the way we encourage females into engineering. The lady this morning, who's unfortunately, I can't remember her name, but anyone who checks back on the programmes from this morning.
Dawn Boomfield.
Thank you for your assistance. Those that wish to be more proactive could very easily contact her, and I'm sure that she will be prepared to come and speak to us. I would be very enthusiastic to attend that sort of meeting. Thank you, Chairman.
Philippa.
Thank you. Just a quick question with regards to the start-up businesses. I know that the districts and boroughs are supporting on that side of it. I just wondered what the spread out was and what the uptake was at those districts and boroughs, and if there's anything we can learn to pass on to the other ones.
That is a zinger of a question. I haven't got the data to hand, but we do have that data. We found across a range of the programmes that we've run jointly with our partners in the districts and boroughs that there has been a significant spread in terms of high uptake areas and lower uptake areas, but it has varied from scheme to scheme. So what we would probably need to do is to provide the committee with the information about that scheme, but also a few of the others, particularly the ones where we use the COVID Recovery Fund money, and allow you to have a look at all of those. From memory, Cannock Chase District Council is pretty much bang in the middle in terms of those. It's not an outlier in either respect, but we'll provide the information to the committee, and if you've got any questions about it, then please do speak to me. But our working with Cannock Chase District Council on these sort of schemes is very good. Dean's a very good officer to work with there. Have you got anything you'd like to add to that?
If I may, just very briefly, one of the challenges, of course, is that it's quite a tapestry of programmes, and we've tried to create some kind of continuity through the county council's resources. So I think it would be very helpful if the county is able to increase its role over it's doing at the moment, because some business in different administrative areas try to apply for a particular grant, but because that local authority isn't supporting it, then they're not able to benefit from it unless the county has resources. So working more strategically is certainly beneficial, but the previous administration was very much on a district and borough basis, but we'll have to see what happens going forward.
I think that information will be vital to all of us. Is that going to come out just as a briefing note on email, Philip? Yeah, okay. Graham.
Thank you. As you strayed into an area that I'm deeply interested in, I'll give you some feedback from teachers about recent announcements. One is, it's not pay that drives people out of the teaching profession, it's the utter bureaucracy that they have to spend hours every day filling out forms. And the second thing that teachers are very worried about is the lessening of anything regarding discipline, because that takes so much of their time when a child is extremely disruptive. So having appropriate measures to look after that will help stop teachers and teaching assistants leaving, in my view. Thank you.
Yeah, so we're in total agreement, aren't we, on those two areas?
And my daughter's a teacher as well. She would agree with you wholeheartedly on that, Graham. Any more questions? Bernard?
Thank you. I think, as you know, the M6, M54 link road has now been held up till possibly 2027 and maybe longer. The problem now is, how can we guarantee with the new government as well that that link road will actually take place? But the worst of it all is the understanding that things need doing in this area, but they're not being done because the link road was said to be going to be built. We don't know whether that will happen. What kind of guarantees can we have that the actual A460 area and the surrounding area of that can be, if you want to, worked on correctly like everybody else? Because at the moment, everything seems to be left until the link road is built. And that, of course, again, was never intended to happen by the looks of it, because it should have been done a few years ago. So what guarantees can we have? Because with the new government coming in, it might not even take place.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I bounced over that junction the weekend before last on my way to Shrewsbury. So although it's the other end of the county from me, I've got recent experience, as has the suspension of my car. driving over that. That link road is much needed. In terms of guarantees, I'm afraid I can't offer you any. It is a matter for the government. In terms of what we are doing, I'll perhaps ask Mr. Ayres just to speak to the roads maintenance side of things, but I know we are looking at what we can do in the interim to try and improve the condition of the roads there. What we want to avoid, though, is spending large amounts of taxpayers' money on something that might be abortive if the link road comes forward shortly. More broadly than that, the two things that we are doing are we are lobbying government very, very hard and have got straight out of the traps as soon as the new government's in place to say, could you please confirm both major roads programmes, so the A5500 corridor we've just spoken about, the link road is another example of this. Can you confirm that funding is in place for those? Also, more broadly, we would like confirmation of the roads maintenance funding that the last government announced, which is a 10-year funding package which dramatically increases our capacity to carry out maintenance on our roads. At the moment, we're carrying out that maintenance on the backs of the Staffordshire taxpayer through our £50 million investment programme, which we're in the second year of now. But for that to be sustainable, we need that funding confirmed. The other thing that we are doing, very similar to the A50, A500 growth corridor, is we're working very closely with South Staffordshire District Council and City of Wolverhampton Council on the green growth corridor proposals for the south of the county, which, if they're successful, should unlock further investment in the road network in the south of the county as well. So I can't offer you the guarantee. I wish I could, but it is a very important piece of our road network, and we are campaigning hard to make sure that funding is agreed. Mr. Ayres, have you got anything to say just about what we are doing to hold that bit of the road network together in the meantime?
Once again, the Deputy Leader stole everything I was going to say, but we are looking at the temporary repairs that we can do on that junction because it is awful. And the reason they hadn't been done sooner was exactly as you said, we were waiting for National Highways to deliver their projects, so we didn't have abortive costs. So we're looking at the most cost-effective way of doing that, but we're still chasing National Highways to give us a sense of timescales because we need to know how long those repairs need to hold. We don't want to be going back once we've done them, but we also don't want to do full repairs tomorrow and then in a few months' time, which I know is unlikely, they come and dig up the road. But we are working on the plans for what those temporary repairs look like because we have to do them now to make sure it's safe around there. The other bit I'd say is let's not forget during the planning session that this committee had for its future work programme, I'd suggested you invite National Highways here directly to talk through the various projects they've got planned for and are doing in Staffordshire so you could scrutinise them directly, a bit like you do with HS2. And I think that will be really helpful because, as the Deputy Leader said, we don't run National Highways. We can lobby. We're all on the same page on that in terms of pushing them and putting them under pressure. But inviting them here for a scrutiny session, I think, would be really valuable.
We have got that, Darryl, on the work plan. I think it's going to be an online because it'll be a one-item agenda, so it'll be more of a on Teams for us to all log into and ask our questions. And yeah, it's what we need. We need to know where the major projects are. We need to know timescales. David, you've got a question, haven't you?
Chairman, I probably failed in my comments to make my comments as a question, so perhaps I'll reframe it. Are we prepared to consider the possibility of a meeting of educationalists and the lady who finally I was given the name of, to come to a meeting here to have a discussion about females in engineering? I think that could be very constructive. I think it could be very proactive. I'm not asking for a decision at the moment. I'm just asking two things, really. One, is that something that the Cabinet member would have been prepared to organise? Or secondly, is that something which this committee would be empowered to undertake? Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Smith, we'll look at the work programme and try and fit it in where we can. We are very full and fuller. We've already put an extra meeting in October, but where we see fit, we'll try and get that in, and we'll get the lady's name and details so that Debs can...
We would do it as a committee.
We would do it as probably as a briefing and potentially...
In the cabinet, in the council chamber, and have maybe...
Well, we'll look at where we can fit that in and how it can be delivered.
I'd be very happy to cooperate with that.
Okay. I think the cabinet member's got enough work on his plate, so I think we'll organise that for him.
Well, that's absolutely fine. I was just going to say yes. We'd certainly be very happy to look at that. The skills arena is all about working in partnership. So if we've got someone there with a voice and some influence who is willing to work with us, then we'd be delighted to. So perhaps we'll coordinate our efforts.
Anthony, have we covered what you were going to say, or is there anything else we seem to have gone through everything beyond where you stopped?
No, I wouldn't add anything further, thank you. I think the Deputy Leader's covered it fantastically, thank you.
So if there are no further questions or comments, we've got 4 recommendations today. Just go back up to the top of my screen. I'm not going to read them all out. There's A to D. Are we happy to move those on block?
Move them, Chairman.
Thanks, David. Seconded by Graham. Thank you very much. And we'll sort out the other things we've discussed. Where's my bloody thing? Oh, there we are. So we'll move swiftly on. Lee, did you want to join us? Item 5 is Civil Parking Enforcement Working Group report. Now, I'm just going to use my chairman's, as I've got the floor at the moment. Before I get my Vice Chair, Peter Cruz-Conjic, to deliver the outcome, I just want to say a massive thank you to Lee and the team for engaging with us. It's not been an easy one to do with all the other things we've got going on. And getting everybody in the room so that we can bat it backwards and forwards to each other was also quite difficult. So also thank you to my Vice Chair, Peter, for taking this on. It was something he was quite passionate about with issues in Cannock to begin with. And thank you to everyone that attended the working group, because it ended up being a bigger piece of work, but the outcomes, I'm sure you will agree, are where we need to be. So over to Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to reiterate what the Chairman said and thank everybody who's been involved in it, members, officers, Deb, for stepping in the breach when Jonathan left. So thank you, everybody, and thanks for all the input that everybody's given. We were tasked with this to come up with, to review the civil parking enforcement strategy that's coming up for renewal in 2025, to look at the system to see if it's fit for purpose and if we thought any recommendations could be made to improve on what we've already got. If you just bear with me, I've just jotted a few notes down. Yeah. When we were looking at fit for purpose, it was just like, as things have changed, parking has become a bigger issue nowadays. I mean, we looked at before COVID and after COVID, and we looked at staffing levels and stuff like that. So as an offspring from that, we decided to have a working group and a scoping day to understand what was involved with the parking, you know, what the practices were, what the current arrangements were, and how we could look at improving them. From that, we took one member from each of the districts, so we could get a firm understanding what issues they had in their own districts and boroughs. And that ended up with us going out with officers and seeing firsthand what challenges they had. And we questioned them, we saw it firsthand, and that was information that we brought back. Then we had meetings with people from the police, the crime commissioner, and other authorities like Stoke-on-Trent to see what was in place at the time, what their responsibilities and duties were, where there's a consistency in the service that we supplied throughout Staffordshire. Thanks to yourself, Lee, and others who came back with the SLAs to see how we were performing against our targets. And that went on. We then pulled all the information that we got, and that got us to the stage where we made the 7 recommendations. I hope everybody's had the opportunity to read through the report in some detail to see if there's anything that I'd like to highlight that we think we've missed during the period that we've reviewed. Anybody? Lee, if you want to make any comments.
No, I think, again, I was very grateful, as you say, I was very grateful for sewer parking enforcement being kind of put on the agenda for once. It seems to be slightly, at times it's a bit of a hot potato, but I think obviously the observations by the members kind of reiterated our view or position of it's a frustrating job. It's a thankless task by the sewer enforcement officers, and I think that there's a balance of more enforcement, but with the costs, the overheads. Since we brought the service back in 2015, the overheads are steadily increasing, because of cost of fuel, living wage, etc. And unfortunately, as one of the recommendations, the penalty charge notice levels aren't moving in line. And my line manager did a study I think about 5-6 years ago, and I think the price point should have been around about £100 if it had gone in line with inflation year on year. The value hasn't been reviewed since 2008, and I think that's where ultimately at the moment that's where the gap is ever increasing with the deficit. And obviously there's ways of potentially recouping some of the revenue in terms of throwing more resource at it, but unfortunately throwing more resource at it is more cost, and you don't know until you put the resource out there whether you'll get the penalty charge notices. There's obviously as well the reputational damage it could cause to the county in terms of targeting the driver, targeting people who are just trying to earn a living or go about the daily way. So it's a bit of a catch-22 at times.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. I think you've hit on the point there, the cost of living. We need to increase the penalty charge notices because at the moment it's not a cost-effective service that we're running. The fines at the moment are not really a deterrent. People are willing to take the chance that they won't get caught, and I think one of the recommendations was, and what the observations were, by the time somebody's reported an issue, then by the time the officers come, they've moved on. So in effect it's a wasted journey, so it's a waste of a resource, and I think we do need to implement the recommendations and enforce them. Any comments from anybody about the report? Charlotte?
I'm just going to ask Lee about, pavement parking, because clearly this is an issue, particularly for someone who's visually impaired or for people who are using buggies or wheelchairs. And it does cause real problems that people have to go into the street. But, if you have a community with a lot of terrace streets, it's very difficult to know where those cars will go. Now, obviously, as you know, we are looking at this in Leek and looking at residents being able to park in car parks overnight. But it doesn't really get round the problem that although we're talking about pavement parking being illegal, that you haven't got the resources to do anything about it. And so it's a dilemma, which I think all of us have no idea how to resolve. Because, I'm working with a gentleman who uses a guide dog within Leek, and he comes across these obstructions all the time. And also people who are using wheelchairs. It is just unacceptable. So I don't know if there is a way forward, because there are certain streets where the pavements are already very narrow, and it means that those residents are coming out of their, if it's a terrace street, coming out of their front doors straight onto the pavement. And I know that Darrell will be aware of a situation within Nelson Street in Leek North, where a gentleman is in fear of his life because he comes out of his door and a lorry might well virtually take the door off its hinges. So, it is a real problem about vehicles, particularly large vehicles, but also cars as well, impeding the pavement. It's particularly difficult for vulnerable residents. And I don't know if you have any ideas about how that can be resolved, because inevitably people will park on the pavement if, you know, well, they're being inconsiderate, certainly, but people will do it, and unless there is some sort of penalty, then they'll continue to do it because it's convenient for them and they don't think about the more vulnerable pavement users.
Charlotte, I think just on that one, it's down to each borough or district whether they take on the pavement parking issue. Is it outside of London?
No, so at the moment the powers aren't able for any authority outside of London. I think it was 2018 there was a consultation. It might have been 2019, but obviously with COVID came along, it kind of unfortunately got kicked into the long grass a little bit. There was options for, DfT went out for consultation on 3 scenarios where it was a it was a consistent blanket ban on pavement parking as per London. There was basically allowing pavement parking by way of TROs, or there was the option of having it as by TRO to ban it, but to allow pavement parking in the opposite way. I think in London, obviously, it's pretty cut and dry, and I think obviously pavement parking's been in for a number of years there, you know, so I think it's well understood, and London is very different to a lot of the towns and cities in outside of there. It's very compact, it's condensed, and obviously as well, cars aren't primarily the main use in London. You look at Shire authorities, you say you've got Leek, you've got East Staffordshire, Burton in particular, Newcastle, where I think a lot of residents do the right thing where they park half on and half off to maximise a through route along that site, along those 2 streets. I think, like you say, there's the people who don't think and park on the footway because they don't want their vehicle damaged, by the wing mirrors, etc. But I think there's also streets, you look at Tixall Road, for example, in Stafford, where you can have pavement parking and it doesn't cause an obstruction as long as it's reasonably uniform. I think from our perspective, whatever powers are going to be brought in, I think there will be. I think the government will at some point bring it in because there's been enough traction, especially with kind of the visibly impaired charities and support groups. I think it's got to be right for us. My view is a blanket ban isn't the right choice for a lot of areas, including ourselves, because it's not a one-size-fits-all. I think the only problem we would have is having that kind of element where there would be a drive to implement traffic regulation orders to allow or permit pavement parking, which is obviously a cost to the authority. There's having the resource as well, because as well we don't know the demand. Once people are aware that we can enforce it, we don't know really the demand that the police get. What would come to us, we get emails coming in asking about pavement parking to enforce it, and we advise we can't enforce it. However, we don't know, is that a tip of the iceberg or every kind of level of demand? So I think if we were to be given the powers, it'd be quite eye-opening potentially, where the demand would suddenly rocket from day one. And I think there would have to be, our view was always on the consultation, it had to be a pragmatic kind of site-by-site basis where a CEO could, whether you take a meter rule or something, but you look and you do a judgment in terms of can a wheelchair or double buggy or pushchair get past. I mean, that's where there has to be that pragmatism in the county rather than a stick that hits everyone, because a lot of people are trying to do the right thing and trying to allow for protect their own vehicle and property, but also allow for people to get around their daily business. So I don't think it's going to be any time soon because of the new government and other pressing matters. Well, I think it will be coming up within this Parliament, I would imagine. But how it fits for us, that's the question. I wouldn't recommend that a blanket would be the right solution for Staffordshire. And I think the government would likely probably do a kind of a halfway house, which could be blended because you're looking at cities like Manchester and Leeds, but then you've got your Shrewsbury's, your Stafford, you've got, it's got to be a blend, I think. I don't think a blanket ban would suit everyone.
Thank you, Lee. I know there's a bill that's been reviewed by the previous government about a pavement parking bill that may go through. Depending on what the new government come up with, we've got to wait and see. Thank you. Thanks, Lee. David?
Thank you. I think one of the interesting things regarding pavement parking, if we didn't have pavement parking in the villages, it would solve the speeding problems through the villages. It probably would stop any access through the villages as well. I look particularly that our roads were obviously not built for the type of vehicles we currently have and the sheer volume of vehicles. Parking in villages on grass verges is a great problem because we have 30% of the population who are over 65. Therefore, we have a large number of people who are in either buggies or something similar. My wife has the same sort of problem where she can't get down certain roads because of the parking on the grass verges and onto the pavement. I look particularly at the sort of problems that if you enforce the law as it stands, you stop completely the access through the road. And I'm thinking particularly of the road through Lemonsley and Lichfield, where people freely park on the verge, blocking the cycleway, which rather defeats the purpose of us ever funding a cycleway into Lichfield, because it is not usable. But if people parked correctly, they would park on the outside of the cycleway, which would be perfectly legal, but would block the whole of the road through Lemonsley. So I suppose rather than looking at increased enforcement or in laws which will prevent this from happening, the option would possibly be having roads with no parking at all. And on that basis, where in heaven's name do people who live there park? So I can see all of the difficulties. I would also look at the problems of enforcement of inconsiderate parking in villages where occasionally we do see enforcement officers, but it's not as often as one would like to see. And I think we need to address the problem of villages. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, David. Philip?
Thanks, Chair. There are 3 traffic offences that are committed by parking on the footpath. One is willful obstruction, one is unnecessary obstruction, and one is driving across the highway. But only the police can deal with that. And so I've looked at the comments from the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner, and I think that the police should do more to help us while we're waiting for the law to perhaps be looked into. And the fact that the PCSOs have got no powers at all. So there's no even point. You can send somebody to speak to a resident that's parking illegally, but they don't even have the power to make that person move the car. The old traffic wardens could. They not only could they enforce our traffic laws, but they could actually require people to move vehicles. Neighbourhood policing teams, they don't just consist of PCSOs, there are police officers as well. But it seems to me that since the councils were allowed to issue tickets, that the police just think it's not within their remit anymore. Oh, yes, it is. It still is in their powers to deal with it. And in areas where it is dangerous, then the neighbourhood policing team should get involved and go out there and deal with it. And it just, and if we did bring these new powers in, we haven't got the amount of people to enforce it. And it's like the villages, a neighbourhood policing team could go out to a village and speak to residents and ask them to move cars or look at it. But you've got to do a balancing act. I remember 30 years ago, our inspector sending us out to Apples Bromley to a specific place, and we were told to issue tickets to every vehicle that was parked facing the wrong way at night. We did. The next morning, his phone didn't stop ringing. So it's all about a balancing act, and it's about working together. And I feel, I'm an ex-police officer. I have to admit that I did 30 years. But I feel that they don't do enough to help us now, the police. It's like nothing to do with us anymore. Well, it is. We have problems in Uttoxeter where if they just helped a little bit, would stop it. And, anyway, that's my view on it. So there are offences there that can be dealt with, but unfortunately, our enforcement officers don't have the power to do it. Local policing teams do, and they need to get more involved.
Thanks, Philip. I think what you've touched on is education, working with our partners, with schools and educating people really so they can highlight the dangers of it and the impact they're having on the communities by inconsiderate parking. So just going back to the report, there's one thing I'd like to emphasise. I know we've had a change of government, but we still need to lobby our MPs to take it to the Department of Transport about increasing the fines to be an active deterrent. So I'd hope everybody will support that. Looking at the recommendations, there's 7. I'm not going to read through them verbatim. So has everybody had a chance to look at the recommendations on the report?
Yep. Happy to move.
And happy to move them and support?
Yep. I'll second.
Okay, thank you, David.
Second.
Thank you, Chair.
On that last point, Peter, I thought you were going to do a pro forma for each county councillors to send to their new MP. I'm pretty sure that's what the agreement was about increasing the fines.
Okay, that will be something I'll do. Yeah, thanks. Okay, any comments? Lee? Okay, thank you very much. Thanks. Right, thanks, everybody.
Well done.
Thank you.
We'll go move swiftly on to the work programme. I'm just waiting for it to load. My computer's on go slow, sorry. Just wait for it to load the work programme in. So, right, yeah. So the next meeting we've got is on it's Thursday, the 26th of September, at 10 o'clock in the morning. And we've got the HS2 6-monthly update. We've got highways transformation and the Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent economic strategy. And please make note that we've got an extra meeting on the 24th of October. Again, we've got 3 items on there. We may have to put an extra meeting in March like we did last year because Darryl likes to keep us busy. That's all I'm going to say on that. So ensure that you know where we are on each agenda item, and if anything changes or Darryl brings us anything that's urgent, the work programme could change. Any comments from you, Deb? David?
Only, Chairman, that we need to add in the possible sessions on women in engineering, and it may be worthwhile because we have quite a lot of work to be had within committee, that you may want to have just a small subcommittee to get on and do that. So we need to add that to our work programme.
Yeah,
Thank you, Chairman.
we'll look at that. Deb's has got that down. We'll have a look where that fits best, and it might just be an online. But it would be nice to meet her actually, so perhaps we can do that face to face, but fit it in where we've got, so you're not coming to county for one item agenda, because that's just a waste of our time. Okay, so if there's nothing else, I don't think there's anything else. Oh yeah, just, sorry, Deb. Wait.
Thanks, Chair. So on the 8th of July, the committee met to go through the informal work programme and discuss items that they wanted to come forward. And we have been in consultation with Darryl's team to try and get some dates and some prioritisation going on some of those items. So in addition to the 2 meetings you've already mentioned, Chair, we move on to the November meeting where we've already identified community learning self-assessment report. But there are other reports highlighted in a long list which members may want a brief discussion today or at the next triangulation meeting with Darryl and the Cabinet members, and that's on the 10th of September.
Yeah, we'll do that in triangulation. Thanks, Deb. Okay, everyone happy? Good. Just go back. Yeah, you're. Can you see that Councillor Hutton's ready to leave? It's got his trainers on, ready to run. So the date of the next meeting, as I've already said, is the 26th of September at 10 o'clock in the morning. And that brings us to the end of today's meeting. I thank you all for your attendance this morning. Darryl especially, thank you for coming in. And I'll close the meeting at 11:08. Thanks very much.